pressed her small body against the cold metal wall as heavy footsteps thundered past her hiding spot. 3 guards ran through the maintenance tunnel, their massive forms shaking the floor with each step. They chased a smuggler who had tried to steal rare crystals from the upper market levels. "Move, scum!" one guard shouted as he shoved past a maintenance worker. The worker stumbled but said nothing. No one ever said anything to the guards. Waited until the sounds faded before stepping out from behind the broken ventilation unit. The guards had not even seen her. Most beings never did. She was small, even for a female, with pale blue skin that seemed to blend into the shadows of the lower tunnels. Her large, dark eyes held no glow, unlike other members of her species whose eyes lit up when they used their mental powers. She walked slowly down the tunnel, picking up pieces of debris that had fallen during the chase. Her worn clothes hung loose on her thin frame. The fabric had once been white, but years of crawling through dirty spaces had turned it gray. She carried a small bag made from old food containers, collecting broken parts that might be useful later. Nexus Station was huge. Thousands of different species lived and worked here. Ships came and went every day, bringing traders, diplomats, and travelers from across the galaxy. The upper levels were bright and clean, filled with expensive shops and fancy restaurants. The middle levels housed most residents and workers, but down here in the maintenance tunnels, only the forgotten ones lived. Had been down here for 8 years. She was 24 now, though she looked much younger because of poor food and constant stress. Her people, were known throughout the galaxy for their mental gifts. They could speak to each other with thoughts alone, sharing feelings and ideas without words. They formed close family groups through these mental connections. But was different. She had been born silent. No mental voice, no ability to connect with others of her kind. The called beings like her broken or empty. Her family had tried to help when she was young, taking her to healers and teachers. Nothing worked. Finally, when she turned 16, they brought her to Nexus Station and left her here. They said it was kinder than keeping her in their world where she would always be alone. She found a broken cooling pipe that needed repair. Water dripped from a crack, creating a small flood on the tunnel floor. Knelt beside it and opened her tool bag. The tools were old and rusty, found or traded for over the years. She had taught herself to fix things by watching maintenance crews and studying discarded repair manuals. The cooling system was important. If it failed, the air recyclers on this level would stop working. People might get sick or even die. But no one paid attention to maintenance work in the deep tunnels. The official crews rarely came down here. They thought the systems would fix themselves or that someone else would handle problems. Worked carefully, sealing the crack with recycled metal and old sealant. Her hands moved with skill that had taken years to develop. She understood how the station's systems worked better than most trained engineers. But no one knew this. No one cared. When she finished the repair, she sat back on her heels and wiped sweat from her forehead. The tunnel was quiet again. She could hear the distant hum of the main power generators and the soft whisper of air moving through vents. These sounds were her only company most days. She gathered her tools and continued walking through the tunnels, checking other systems. A waste processor had a clogged filter. She cleaned it. An air vent had come loose from the wall. She tightened the bolts. A light panel flickered with dying power cells. She replaced them with cells she had found in a trash bin. Hours passed. Her stomach hurt from hunger, but she ignored it. Food was expensive, and she only had a few credits saved from odd jobs. She would eat tomorrow, maybe. As evening came, made her way to her home. It was not really a home, just a forgotten storage room deep in the station's belly. She had found it empty years ago and slowly made it livable. A broken bed from the medical bay. A table made from old shipping containers. A small heating unit that barely worked. She sat on the bed and looked out through a tiny window. The window was meant for emergency access to space, but it gave her a view of the stars. Ships moved like bright dots against the darkness, carrying people to places she would never see. Sometimes wondered what it would be like to have a real home, to have people who cared if she lived or died, to have someone notice when she fixed important things or worked for days without rest. She had dreams where she lived in a bright place with soft furniture and good food, where people spoke to her with kindness instead of ignoring her completely. But dreams were just dreams. Reality was cold tunnels and broken machines and the constant feeling of being invisible. She had tried once to join a maintenance crew officially. The supervisor had laughed at her. "We don't hire defective aliens," he had said. "Go find somewhere else to beg." Pulled an old blanket around her shoulders and closed her eyes. Tomorrow would be the same as today. More broken systems to fix, more problems to solve in silence, more hours of being nothing to anyone. She had accepted this long ago. This was her life and it would never change. Outside her small window, the stars continued to shine, distant and unreachable. Inside the storage room, a young female fell asleep on a broken bed, dreaming of impossible things while the station hummed around her, kept running by her invisible work. Commander Sarah checked her handheld map again and frowned. According to the display, she should have reached the main maintenance office 10 minutes ago. Instead, she found herself in a narrow tunnel that smelled like recycled air and machine oil. The walls were lined with pipes and cables that hummed with power. Sarah was new to Nexus Station. She had arrived 3 weeks ago as a human diplomatic representative, tasked with improving relations between different species. Part of her job involved understanding how various beings lived and worked on the station. Today, she wanted to learn about the maintenance crews who kept this massive structure running. She had started on the middle levels, talking to shift supervisors and reviewing work reports. But the supervisors kept saying the real work happened in the lower levels. When Sarah asked to visit those areas, they made excuses. "Too dangerous for civilians," they said. "Nothing interesting down there anyway." This only made Sarah more curious. In her experience, when people tried to hide something, that was exactly where she needed to look. So she had slipped away from her guide and taken a service elevator down to the deep maintenance levels. Now she was lost. The tunnels all looked the same, and her map was not very detailed for these areas. She turned a corner and found herself in a wider section where several tunnels met. Water dripped from somewhere above, and the lighting was dim. That was when she heard the sound, metal scraping against metal, followed by a frustrated grunt. Someone was struggling with something heavy. Sarah followed the noise down a side tunnel and found the source. A small blue-skinned alien was wrestling with a massive cooling unit. The machine was taller than Sarah and twice as wide. It had several panels removed, exposing a tangle of wires and fluid lines. Tools were scattered on the floor around it, and the alien was trying to lift a heavy component that was clearly meant for multiple workers to handle. Sarah watched for a moment, amazed. The alien was tiny compared to the machine, but she worked with obvious skill and determination. Her movements were precise, even though she struggled with the weight of the parts. "Excuse me," Sarah called out. "Do you need help?" The alien froze. She slowly turned around, her large dark eyes wide with shock. She stared at Sarah for several seconds without speaking, as if she could not believe someone had actually talked to her. I am sorry," the alien said in a soft voice. "I did not know anyone was down here. I will move if you need to pass." No, Sarah said quickly. "I am not trying to get past. I asked if you need help. That looks like a big job for one person." The alien's eyes grew even wider. "You want to help me?" "If I can," Sarah said. "What are you working on?" "The cooling unit for this section," the alien said. Her voice was uncertain, as if she was not sure she should be talking about her work. "It has been failing for 3 days. If it stops completely, the air recyclers will shut down. People could get sick." Sarah looked at the complex machine and back at the small alien. "How long have you been working on this?" "Since yesterday morning," the alien said. "I have not stopped except for a few minutes of sleep." "By yourself?" Sarah was shocked. "Where is your crew?" The alien looked confused by the question. "Crew?" "Your work team, other maintenance workers, who is in charge of this repair." "Just me," the alien said. "No one else comes down here." Sarah felt a growing anger, but she kept it out of her voice. "What is your name?" The alien said quietly. "I am Sarah, and I think this cooling unit is too big a job for one person, even someone as skilled as you obviously are." Blinked skilled. "Yes," Sarah said firmly. "I can see from your work that you know what you are doing, but this is clearly meant to be a team job. Let me help you." Sarah took off her diplomatic jacket and rolled up her sleeves. She had grown up on a space station herself, helping her father repair ships. She knew her way around machines. For the next 4 hours, they worked together. Sarah lifted heavy parts while guided them into place, explained how each system connected to the others, showing a deep understanding of the station's design. Sarah asked questions about life and work. Slowly began to talk more. She explained how she lived alone in the tunnels, fixing things that broke. How most people never saw her or pretended she did not exist. How she had been alone for 8 years. 8 years? Sarah was horrified. "You have been doing maintenance work alone for 8 years." "It is not official work," said. "I just fix things that need fixing. If I do not, they stay broken." "But you must have training. You know these systems better than most engineers I have met." Looked away. "I learned by watching and reading old manuals and making mistakes." Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You are not just skilled, you are brilliant." Stopped working and stared at her. "No one has ever said that about me before." "Then no one has been paying attention," Sarah said. They finished the repair as the station entered its night cycle. The cooling unit hummed to life, working perfectly. Cool air began flowing through the vents again. "We did it," Sarah said, wiping grease from her hands. "You did it," said. "I could never have moved those heavy parts alone." "We did it together," Sarah corrected. "And now I think we should celebrate." Looked puzzled. "Celebrate?" "Yes, a successful repair deserves recognition. Let me buy you dinner." Dinner's voice was very small. "You want to eat with me?" "Of course," Sarah said. "We are a team now. Teams celebrate together." Hesitated. "I do not think I am allowed in the restaurants upstairs." "You are with me," Sarah said firmly. "A diplomatic representative of Earth. That makes you my guest, and my guest goes wherever I go." For the first time since Sarah had met her, smiled. It was a small, uncertain smile, but it lit up her face. "I would like that very much," she said quietly. As they walked toward the elevators that would take them to the upper levels, Sarah felt a determination growing inside her. Something was very wrong with how was being treated. Someone with her skills and dedication should not be living like this. Sarah did not yet understand all the details, but she intended to find out. And she intended to do something about it. The elevator ride to the diplomatic quarter felt like traveling to another world. Pressed herself into the corner, overwhelmed by the bright lights and clean surfaces. She had never been this high in the station before. Her clothes, still dirty from the repair work, looked terrible next to Sarah's neat uniform. "I should not be here," whispered as they passed through the security checkpoint. The guards looked at her with suspicion, but Sarah's diplomatic credentials got them through. "You are my guest," Sarah said firmly. "You belong wherever I say you belong." The restaurant was more beautiful than anything had ever imagined. Crystal lights hung from the ceiling like captured stars. The tables were made of polished wood from distant planets. Soft music played in the background, and the air smelled like flowers instead of machine oil. Other diners stared as Sarah led to a table near the window. Could hear their whispers. "What is that thing doing here? Is that why does it not glow? Someone should tell security." Sarah heard them too. Her face grew stern. "Ignore them," she told as she pulled out a chair. "Sit down." Had never had someone pull out a chair for her before. She sat carefully, afraid to touch anything. The chair was soft and comfortable, nothing like the broken furniture in her storage room. A waiter approached their table. He was tall with silver skin and 4 arms. His expression showed clear disapproval as he looked at. "Commander," he said, speaking only to Sarah, "we have private dining rooms if you prefer." "This table is fine," Sarah said coolly. "We would like to see the menu." The waiter hesitated, then handed Sarah a menu. He ignored completely. "My friend needs a menu too," Sarah said. "Of course," the waiter said, but his tone suggested otherwise. He placed a menu in front of as if it might contaminate his hands. Stared at the menu, unable to focus on the words. She had never eaten in a restaurant before. She did not know how this worked or what anything cost. The prices she could see were more than she spent on food in a month. Sarah noticed her confusion. "What do you like to eat?" she asked gently. "Anything," said honestly. "I am not picky." "That is not what I asked," Sarah smiled. "What foods do you enjoy? What tastes good to you?" No one had ever asked about her preferences before. She thought carefully. "I like sweet things," she said, "and warm soup when I am cold." Sarah studied the menu. "They have honey cakes here, and a soup made with vegetables from 3 different worlds. Would you like to try those?" Nodded, not trusting her voice. While they waited for their food, Sarah asked questions about life. She wanted to know about how had learned to repair machines, about what she did with her time. Found herself talking more than she had in years. Sarah listened to every word, asking follow-up questions that showed she really cared about the answers. No one had ever paid such attention to what's said before. "You mentioned that your people can speak with their minds," Sarah said, "but you cannot do this." "I was born silent," explained. "My people call beings like me broken. We cannot connect to the group consciousness that makes my species special." "That must have been lonely," Sarah said softly. "My family tried to help when I was young," said, "but nothing worked. Finally, they decided it would be kinder to leave me somewhere I could be alone instead of being surrounded by people I could never really reach." Sarah's expression grew angry. "They abandoned you." "They thought it was best," said quickly. "I do not blame them. I would have been miserable in their world." "But you were 16 years old," Sarah said, "just a child." "I survived," said. "I learned to take care of myself." Their food arrived. The soup was rich and warming, filled with vegetables had never tasted before. The honey cakes were sweet and light, melting on her tongue. It was the best meal she had ever eaten, but more than that, she was eating it with someone who wanted to share time with her. As they ate, Sarah asked about repair work. Described the different systems she maintained, the problems she solved, the improvements she had made over the years. "Wait," Sarah said, stopping mid-bite. "You have been maintaining life support systems for 8 years, by yourself." "Only in my section of the tunnels," said, "but yes." "That is incredible," Sarah said. "Those systems are critical. If they fail, people could die." "That is why I fix them," said simply. Sarah was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Have you ever looked at the official maintenance records for your section?" "I cannot access those systems," said. "I do not have clearance." "But I do," Sarah said. "May I check something?" She pulled out a handheld computer and typed rapidly. Her expression grew more amazed as she read. She said slowly, "According to these records, your section of the station has had 97% fewer system failures than any other area over the past 8 years." "That is good," said, not understanding why Sarah looked so shocked. "It is not just good, it is impossible, unless," Sarah looked up, "you have been preventing those failures, haven't you? You fix problems before they become emergencies." Nodded. "It is easier to repair small problems before they become big ones." But that means you understand these systems better than the official engineers, Sarah said. You can predict what will break before it actually breaks. I just pay attention, said. Sarah shook her head in amazement. You are not just brilliant, you are a genius. After dinner, Sarah walked back toward the maintenance levels. But instead of going to the deep tunnels, she stopped at the administrative offices. I want to check something else, she said. Using her diplomatic access, Sarah pulled up more detailed records. What she found made her furious. She said quietly, have you ever had problems with your repairs being undone, things you fixed breaking again too quickly? Looked surprised. Sometimes, I always thought I made mistakes. You did not make mistakes, Sarah said grimly. Someone has been sabotaging your work. She showed the records. Several times over the years, repairs had made were deliberately broken within days, causing the failures that then had to fix again. Why would someone do that? Asked. Sarah was beginning to understand. Because they need you to be seen as useless, she said. If people knew how skilled you really are, it would challenge some very unfair ideas. As they finally reached the tunnel entrance, Sarah turned too. I am not going to let this continue, she said firmly. You deserve better than this. Nothing will change, said sadly. This is just how things are for beings like me. Then we will change how things are, Sarah said. Trust me. As disappeared into the tunnels, Sarah stood for a long moment, planning. Tomorrow, she would start making calls. People were going to answer some very difficult questions about how they treated one very remarkable engineer. The emergency alarms woke Sarah from a deep sleep. Red lights flashed in her quarters as the station's computer announced a critical system failure in the main life support hub. Sarah dressed quickly and ran toward the command center. The central corridor was filled with panicked beings. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows as people rushed toward evacuation points. Sarah pushed through the crowd, using her diplomatic status to reach the command deck. Station administrator, a massive with gray skin, was shouting orders at a group of engineers. The engineers stood in a tight circle, their eyes glowing as they shared thoughts through their mental connection. But instead of working together smoothly, they seemed confused and frustrated. Report, Sarah demanded as she approached. Major failure in the primary life support hub, growled. Oxygen recyclers are shutting down section by section. We have maybe 6 hours before the air becomes poisonous. Sarah looked at the displays showing the station's status. Red warning lights covered the screens. What is causing it? Unknown, said Vex Captain, the leader of the engineering team. His mental voice carried to all his people, but he spoke aloud for the other species present. The failure pattern makes no sense. Our collective consciousness cannot find the source. Have you tried individual analysis? Sarah asked. The looked at her strangely. Individual analysis is inefficient, said. The collective mind sees more than any single consciousness. But what if the problem requires a different perspective? Sarah pressed. What if your shared thinking is actually limiting your options? Impossible, said firmly. The way has solved countless problems. We do not need primitive individual thinking. Sarah felt a growing certainty about what needed to happen. I think I know someone who might help. We do not need more engineers, said. They are the best system specialists in the galaxy. This engineer is different, Sarah said. She sees things others miss. She laughed harshly. No female engineer is better than a collective. This one is, Sarah said quietly. The room fell silent, stepped forward, his expression angry. There are no engineers on this station except our team. Yes, there are, Sarah said. Has been maintaining critical systems for 8 years. That defective creature's mental voice leaked contempt to his team. The silent ones are useless. They cannot think properly without the collective. Her section has the best maintenance record on the station, Sarah said firmly. Impossible, said. Show me the records. Sarah pulled up the data on the main display. The numbers were clear. Section had fewer failures, faster repairs, and longer system life than anywhere else on the station. This data must be wrong, said, but his voice was uncertain. It is not wrong, Sarah said. And right now, while you stand here arguing, people are running out of air. Step between them. Even if this creature is skilled, she is not authorized to work on critical systems. Then authorize her, Sarah said. What do you have to lose? If she fails, you are no worse off than now. I will not risk the station on some defective alien's wild ideas, said. You will risk it on pride instead, Sarah asked angrily. People will die because you refuse to try something different. The argument continued for precious minutes while the air grew thinner. Finally, Doctor, the station's chief medical officer, spoke up. Commander is right, she said. We must try everything. I formally request that this be given a chance. Other department heads began to agree. The evacuation was going slowly, and many beings could not leave the station quickly enough to escape the failing air supply. Fine, said finally. But when this fails, the responsibility is yours, Commander. Sarah was already moving. Send a team to bring to the life support hub immediately. 30 minutes later, stood in the main engineering center, surrounded by the most advanced beings on the station. She looked tiny and frightened in her dirty work clothes. The collective stared at her with undisguised disgust. You wanted to try individual thinking, Sarah said to the room. Here is your individual thinker. Approached, show us what you see, Silent One, he said mockingly. Walked slowly around the central display, studying the failure patterns. The life support hub was a maze of interconnected systems, each depending on the others. The failures seemed random, but noticed something the collective had missed. The pattern is not random, she said quietly. Someone broke specific connections to hide the real problem. Explain, demanded. Pointed to the display. See how the failures spread. They avoid certain systems while destroying others. If this was natural failure, it would follow stress patterns. This follows a plan. Sabotage, Sarah asked. Yes, said. But more than that. The sabotage is designed to make the collective thinking fail. Each broken system creates false data that confuses the mental network. His eyes blazed with anger. You accuse us of incompetence. No, said. I am saying someone knows how your minds work together and used that knowledge against you. She moved to a secondary control panel and began typing. But I can see the real pattern because I think differently, and I can fix it, but only if you help me. Help you? Was outraged. Yes, said firmly. I cannot reach all the damaged systems alone, but if you follow my instructions exactly, we can repair the damage faster than the saboteur expected. The room erupted in arguments. They were insulted at being asked to follow orders from a defective member of their species, was furious at the suggestion that someone had deliberately attacked the station. But the air was getting thinner, and people were starting to collapse in the outer sections. Finally, Doctor spoke again. We have 2 hours of breathable air left, she said. Either we try this or we all die arguing. Sarah stood beside. I believe in her, she said simply. If she is wrong, we die anyway. If she is right, she saves us all. One by one, the department heads agreed. Finally, even nodded reluctantly. Show us what to do, Silent One, he said. For the next 90 minutes, directed the most complex repair operation in the station's history. She sent teams to specific locations while she worked on the central systems. She had to fight her own fears and the lifetime of conditioning that told her she was worthless. But Sarah stayed beside her, offering quiet encouragement whenever hesitated. You can do this, Sarah whispered. I believe in you. With 30 minutes of air remaining, made the final connection. Fresh oxygen began flowing through the vents again. The station's life support systems came back online, stronger than they had been in years. The room was silent for a moment. Then Doctor began to clap. Others joined in until the entire command center was applauding. Stood in the center of it all, tears streaming down her face. For the first time in her life, people were looking at her with respect instead of disgust. 3 days after saving the station, still could not believe what had happened. She sat in her new quarters on the residential level, looking out at a real window instead of a tiny porthole. The furniture was clean and comfortable. The food dispenser worked perfectly. She had hot water for washing and clothes that fit properly. But the biggest change was how people treated her. Beings who had ignored her for years now stopped to thank her in the corridors. Children pointed at her with excitement instead of fear. Even the guards nodded respectfully when they saw her. Sarah had insisted on a full investigation after the crisis. They discovered that 3 merchant families had been sabotaging's work for years. They feared that if other silent saw succeed, they might challenge the social order that kept them powerless. The saboteurs had planted devices that would break repairs, making her look incompetent. They had also bribed officials to keep her work unofficial and unrecognized. When that was not enough, they had attempted to destroy the life support hub and blame for the failure. But their plan had backfired completely. Instead of destroying, they had given her the chance to prove herself in front of the entire station. Now she was chief systems engineer, with her own department and a team of assistants. The salary was more money than she had ever imagined having, but more important than the credits or the title was the respect. A soft chime announced a visitor. Opened the door to find Sarah standing outside, holding a wrapped package. "How are you settling in?" Sarah asked as she entered the quarters. "It still feels like a dream," admitted. "Sometimes I wake up thinking I will be back in the storage room." "You will never have to go back there," Sarah said firmly. "This is your life now." She handed the package. "I have something for you." Inside was a set of engineer's robes in deep blue fabric. They were beautifully made, with silver threading that caught the light. On the collar was a small emblem showing the station's insignia. "For the ceremony tonight," Sarah explained. "You need to look the part when they officially recognize your promotion." "I cannot wear something this beautiful," said, running her fingers over the soft fabric. "You can and you will," Sarah said. "You have earned the right to stand proud." That evening, the station's main auditorium was filled with beings from dozens of species. Had never seen so many people in one place. She stood backstage in her new robes, trying to control her nervousness. "Ready?" Sarah asked, appearing beside her. "I do not know if I can do this," whispered. "All those people staring at me." "They are not staring with disgust anymore," Sarah reminded her. "They are looking at you with respect, with admiration. You saved their lives. You are a hero." The ceremony was unlike anything had ever imagined. Administrator, who had once called her a defective creature, now spoke about her brilliant engineering skills. Doctor described how her quick thinking had prevented a disaster. Even Vex Captain admitted that the collective had learned important lessons from individual perspective. When walked across the stage to receive her official recognition, the applause was thunderous. Beings stood and cheered for the small female who had once been invisible to them all. But the moment that meant the most came after the ceremony. A young approached hesitantly, like her eyes held no glow. "Excuse me," the young female said. "Are you really the chief engineer?" "Yes," said gently. "But you are silent like me," the young said. "I was told that silent ones could never be important." "I was told the same thing," said. "But it was not true. Being different does not mean being less." Over the following weeks, more silent came forward. They had been hiding throughout the galaxy, believing they were worthless. But news of success spread quickly through communication networks. Sarah helped establish a new engineering program specifically for independent thinkers. They recruited not just silent, but beings from other species who thought differently from their own people. Soon, they had a department of brilliant minds who could solve problems that traditional thinking could not handle. The program was so successful that other stations began requesting similar teams. The silent, once considered defective, became sought after as innovative problem solvers throughout the galaxy. One evening, and Sarah sat in the observation lounge, watching ships come and go through the station's docking bays. It had been 6 months since their first meeting in the maintenance tunnels. "Do you ever regret it?" asked suddenly. "Regret what?" "Stopping to help me that day. Your life would be simpler if you had just walked past like everyone else." Sarah smiled. "Helping you was the best thing I have done in my entire career. Do you know what the galaxy calls you now?" Shook her head. "The silent engineer. There are stories about you on 100 worlds. Young beings who feel different or worthless hear your story and realize they might be special too." "I never wanted to be famous," said. "You are not just famous," Sarah said. "You are hope. Hope for everyone who has ever been told they do not matter." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars, thought about the storage room where she used to live, dreaming of impossible things. None of those dreams had been as wonderful as her reality had become. "Sarah," she said finally. "Yes. Thank you, not for the job or the recognition or any of the other things. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible. Thank you for treating me like I mattered before anyone else believed I did." Sarah reached over and squeezed hand. "I did not give you anything you did not already have," she said. "I just helped you see it yourself." As they sat together watching the endless dance of ships and stars, neither of them knew that their friendship had started something much larger than they had imagined. On distant worlds, other outcasts and misfits were finding courage in story. Other beings like Sarah were learning to look beyond surface differences to see the potential in everyone they met. The galaxy was slowly becoming a place where being different was not a curse, but a gift. And it had all started with one human who refused to walk past someone who needed help, and one brilliant engineer who learned that she had always been worthy of respect. In the end, that was the most human thing of all, the simple belief that every being deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of what others might think of them. It was a small act of kindness that changed not just 2 lives, but an entire civilization's way of thinking. And in the vast darkness of space, that light of understanding continued to spread, one act of compassion at a time.